Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Being 6:31, I think now, we shall begin with this meeting of the Cabinet. Let me begin by reading you the fire evacuation proceedings, which are that there are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exits are located at the rear and side of this room. Please go down the stairs and meet in War Memorial Park, which, for those of you who may not be familiar, is the big park out there. Second thing is to advise you, as I'm sure you're aware, that this meeting is being webcast, and therefore please be mindful of that fact when you're making any contribution. To receive apologies for absence, there are no absentees from the number of eligible members to take part in this meeting. The 3 members of the Cabinet who are also members of the Manydown Executive Committee, by virtue of that fact, are unable to take part. We'll take member and public participation under the agenda item, which we will get to in a minute. Can we just first of all confirm the minutes of the meeting of the 25th of June? Take those as read unless anybody has any points to make on them. Okay, fine. Urgent items, there are none. Referrals from full council, there are none. References and reports from other committees is really covered under the agenda item. There are no petitions. Therefore, we can move straight on to item 11, which is the question of the key decision on the forward plan, pre-submission of the local plan. And what I'm going to do is, I have a number of speakers notified to me. I have 4, in fact. I'm going to ask Councillor Raffel to introduce the plan, and because this is very much a moving project, inevitably it changes a bit from day to day, it seems to me, to ask us to introduce the plan and his proposals thereupon. Then we will have public speaking, and then I shall ask, I think it will be sensible, Councillor Raffel, if you can sum up after all the speakers have spoken rather than take them individually, but I'd leave that up to you. If you feel you wish to respond individually, as there's only 4, please feel free to do so. Right, then could you begin, please, with Councillor Raffel to introduce the paper.
Leader, thank you. On page 2 of 14 are the recommendations that Cabinet needs to consider. I'll read them so the public can hear them. That we consider the comments made by the P&I Committee in respect to the plan and the draft infrastructure delivery plan and the sustainability appraisal of draft policies. We consider the summary of conclusions of the sustainability appraisal and the qualities impact assessment that have been undertaken as an integral part of the preparation of the plan. 3, we recommend that Council approves the pre-submission local plan as a result of what we hear tonight and the decisions we make on the policies tonight. Then after that, it's been to full Council, it will then be submitted to the Secretary of State for examination. 4thly, we delegate authority to me, or technically my position being the portfolio holder for planning, in consultation with the policy manager for the planning policy and infrastructure for minor changes to the plan which may come about as a result of the consultation. And if there are any major changes, then of course we'll bring this back to Council. I'll just speak about 4 and 5 so everyone understands. I've made it abundantly clear that as a result of the consultation, that whatever changes are necessary, we will make them aware to all members, so that whilst we may classify them as minor or perhaps a major, all members can see what they are in case they have a view on whether they are minor or major. So if I can just move to the policies and the site policies. I have listened to what has been said at the Planning and Infrastructure Overview and Scrutiny Committees, and as some of you know, I've actually played an active part in trying to make sure that the best policies are drafted, and I have to begin by commending the members of that committee from all parties who this time round on the plan, I have to say, in almost most occasions have played a constructive part in trying to get the best policies that represent the views of the residents of Basingstoke and Deane in the difficult circumstances, and in some cases very painful circumstances, of there having to be development on greenfield sites. We all approach this knowing that there are communities around Basingstoke that will find this process painful, and my job has been to try and make a judgment, along with the advice that I've got from the officers and the representations from members and members of the public, as to where that pain should occur. It's not an easy task, and I hope that the public listening and the members listening tonight will recognise that I've thought long and hard about it, and at every step of the way I have tried to put in the public domain what I'm thinking, so that the members in particular, but members of the public as well, can have a chance to approach things. Hence, over the weekend, when I was considering the policies, I made a number of changes, and they are before all of us in the subsidiary paper. Following further discussions and representations from some members and the planning officers, I have some further tweaks to make, which I think I'll just list now on the basis that you understand what I have done. So first of all, you'll see there have been some changes to SS 3.1, the many down site policy. In particular, since that publication, which is listed on this schedule of changes, it should be noted that in D, which I think hopefully is I'm just going to have a look at the papers. It's on page 8 of the report. In D, it should now read, instead of include at the front, it should now read make sufficient land available for, and I'll just continue reading, the phased provision of 2 primary schools, a 2-form entry and a 3-form entry, and the phased provision of a secondary school. When required, on the end I should say. In relation to N on that page, which is where it talks about the provision of a dual carriageway, it should say include the provision of a link road and reserve the land for a new dual carriageway between the A339, if required, and the B3400, and ensure that the ability to connect it to a link road to the south beyond the plan period is not prejudiced, and regard shall be had to the best location for crossing the railway line or lines. The road shall be planned as a western bypass for Basingstoke. O should read deletion of and gain funding. So it should just read safeguard the land for the future construction of a dual carriageway as a continuation of a western bypass for Basingstoke from the B3400 to the M3 motorway junction 7, including the crossing of the railway line or lines. P should read this: minimise vehicular access to and from the new development from Roman Road and Roman Way, Winklebury. There should be access from Winklebury by means of footpaths and cycle paths connecting in particular to the country park. For those 2 amendments, the one in relation to the dual carriageway and also that one there, it may be that we'll want to just reflect on what people might say tonight about the correct wording. The crucial thing is we balance up the needs of what the new community will need, and obviously the difficulties that could be inflicted upon the old community at Winklebury. And no vehicular access could cause unintended consequences and might not survive the plan inspection. It might have to be changed, but conversely, no condition being imposed could cause adverse consequences to the residents of Winklebury. So we want to put some level of protection in that, and it's the correct wording we want to perhaps revisit. Now, there was, I just want to check, as you will have seen, there's a change in the policy to 40% affordable housing. That's in here. We have, as a consequence of that, the officers have recommended that the references to affordable housing, which were in the policies originally, the site policies, now comes out, as they're all covered by policy CN1, if it be the view of Cabinet to recommend that to full council. There is a policy I've adjusted about new housing in the countryside, which is policy SS6. I'm not sure whether that is in here. Yes, it is. Where there was the word that previously the policy had read that if someone wanted to replace an existing house, so for instance if it had a large plot with a small bungalow on it, it said it had to be proportionate to the side of the replacement building, had to be proportionate, and I thought that wasn't quite what was intended. So I've changed the words to the size of the proposal will be appropriate to the plot, which hopefully means that if someone wants to build a family home where there was a small bungalow on a very large plot, everyone will think that's a good idea. These policies, I have to say, as part of the wider discussions of P&I, they've included the insertion of policies such as strategic gaps between existing communities and communities that may be created during the lifetime of the plan. I've amended today one between Bramley, Sherford-on-Loddon, and the area that is sometimes called Taylor's Farm, sometimes called Sherfield Park, depending on if you live there or if you're a planner, and Razor's Farm or Cufford Farm. Certainly if you go on the website, the people selling the houses, they call it Sherfield Park, and if you ask the people living there, they call it Sherfield Park, because that's what I'm told. So it seems to me that we want to create a strategic gap that covers the whole area. It now covers Bramley Camp as well, and it stretches across the A33, so, and there's a plan of that as well. And we see that as is in some way giving an extra level of protection to those communities who have, as it were, the feeling that houses are moving towards them during the lifetime of this plan, gives them a level of protection, not only during this plan, but hopefully, if the policy is kept, a level of protection beyond. I have changed, on officer advice, policy SS9 will be coming out of the plan. That relates to a site in Whitchurch. As I've said, I've changed the policy on affordable housing to 40%, listening to what the Planning Infrastructure Committee said, that they wished it to be 40%. And on policy EM1 landscape character, representations were made to me about inserting a couple of words about remoteness. That's back in there. In relation to renewable energy, which is policy EM8, we now have a policy which, in my view, subject to what I hear tonight, balances the, in most cases, obvious benefits of renewable energy against the impacts that can be caused by developments that could be in certain locations where one might wonder why they're being placed there, such as wind turbines on top of hills or solar farms in the open countryside. So it's a balanced policy where now we can weigh up, on the one hand, the impacts, which are spelt out, and on the other hand, the benefits. And I hope that is clear for all to understand as these applications are coming forward. The alternative uses with employment areas, I adjusted the policy to a quick 3-stage test, which I think therefore secures our sites and provides 3 tests to make sure that that they don't get dealt with adversely until those tests have been applied. And it seemed the previous policy was didn't quite work, whereas I hope this one does. So, and finally, on the rural economy, policy EP4, I was asked to add in some words about development proposals that result in an increase in HGVs on C&U roads or a significant increase in other traffic on C&U roads will not generally be permitted. and I have added that in. Can I say all of these policies have changed, in my view, substantially since the last round of trying to agree policies, and it has come about because of the cooperation of members and fluent and helpful discussions that they have had with officers. So it would be my recommendation, subject to what I'm about to hear, to Cabinet, but I think I better hear first from the members of the public and the visiting councillors.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, we now move to member and public participation. I have 4 speakers. The first one on my list actually says Councillor Leek, brackets possible. Well, it's clearly a double A, was it? Right. As normal, we have 2 minutes of speaking per person, but as there's only 4 speakers this evening, I'm prepared to be a little lenient on exactly the 2-minute level, but I would ask everybody to try. I will cut you off if you actually manage to get to 3. Councillor Leek.
As Councillor Ruffell has said, Cabinet will be aware of the vast amount of time given by members of the Planning and Infrastructure Committee over the past 2 months to make recommendations to Cabinet on the draft local plan. We've been helped enormously by the portfolio holder, whose commitment has been outstanding. It has not been easy, but the recommendations were generally agreed on a consensual basis. Many of us would have wished for most of the sites to be excluded, and could find good reasons to do so. We listened to all the comments made by local residents and members asking that specific sites be excluded. We did not waver despite our wishes to protect our own residents. In my case, my ward has seen some of the highest development in the borough over the past decade, although the sites now sit in other wards. If approved, north of Marnell Park and the northern part of Manydown will see a further 3,000 houses in my ward alone, which is significantly higher than any other ward. Historically, I have opposed development on those 2 sites, but recognise that we have few other options if we are to deliver 748 dwellings over the next 16 years. I therefore ask that if you want me to support the plan, and it is my intention to do so, I do not hear special pleadings for sites impacting on the wards of Cabinet members. We are where we are, and we all have to accept it. Over the weekend, the portfolio holder has emailed revised versions of a number of policies. In the cases of EP2, of the alternative uses of employment sites, EM2, strategic gaps, EM1, landscape impact, EM8, renewable energy, EP4, rural economy, SS6, housing in the countryside, and CN1, affordable housing, I'm happy to support those, provided they are not changed in a way I consider to be detrimental. However, I cannot support a proposed change to SS 3.10, and I know now that there have been some minor changes, but I'm going to continue with what I'm saying because I'm not entirely happy with what the portfolio has just said. A relatively new clause P has been introduced and clause J amended. The impact of those proposed changes will be to isolate the new development from the neighbouring areas, and even with the revision, I would argue that that is still the case, and cannot be right. It will also mean that access will have to be from the proposed new link road, now suggested to be a dual carriageway, but possibly not, we suddenly hear, such that residents wishing, for instance, to take their children to school at Fort Hill will have to drive onto and along the link road, then via the A339 or the B3400, and then Roman Road to reach the school. That creates unnecessary journey times and increases traffic on the A339 or B3400, particularly at peak school hours. I ask that clause 9 be deleted, but I can be satisfied with an amendment, and that the policy acknowledges access to and from Roman Road, which I think is absolutely vital. We cannot have all the access onto the link road. We need to be brave, but also sensible. We must do what is right for all our residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Leek. Councillor Ruffell, do you wish to respond?
Yes, just briefly, can I thank Councillor Leek for his representations to me, and I hope by what he said he acknowledges that I have listened to what he said. I've listened to what others have said. He wasn't the only member of council to indicate that to me. I can say that some other councillors, some of whom are in the audience, made representations to me as well. If you wish, now you've heard what we're intending, to make further representations, then please do. But it's about striking a right balance, and obviously what I had inserted was perhaps too restrictive, but at the same time we've got to get the right balance.
I'm sure we could find a solution which is satisfactory. What I don't want, I mean, the A339 and I'm sure the B3400 are both, there is heavy traffic on those two roads at peak hours. Other times of day it doesn't matter a jot. But this development is going to increase that traffic, and I just want to be sensible. It's ridiculous that this new site is isolated from Winklebury. It's going to form part of it, let's be quite honest, whatever those living in Winklebury think. But thank you very much for listening. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Leek. Right, the next speaker we have is Councillor Keating. Good evening. Same arrangements as for Councillor Leek.
I came to mention one item, but from what has been said tonight, I'll mention the second one as well. The first and principal item relates to my ward, and that is downrange. I've been active in seeking to protect the downrange from housing development for the last 5 or 6 years. And certainly until 2011, it was something that was well known about. Since then, we've had elections, and one of my ward colleagues has never had the opportunity to make representation about downrange because it falls within the second settlement policy boundary and therefore has been ruled out of order for discussion ever since 2011. Downrange is a playing area. It has substantial sports facilities, well recommended by everybody, well valued by sports people and non-sports people in the town. There is a part of it which is open green, but that part has continual use on Sunday mornings and Saturday mornings by young people on football. So I have tried to persuade people that downrange should be without any form of support from this cabinet for settlement in terms of housing. So that's the principal point I wanted to make, and I wanted to make it because we've been not allowed to discuss it since 2011. And of course we know what happened in 2011. I won't mention any more about that. Also a member of the Manidown map, and we've had discussions there about the interaction and the interface between Winklebury and Manidown. And certainly the long discussions that we've had have included in acceptance of the fact that there is a need for interaction in terms of population, school children, mums and dads, etc., across the different facilities that will in future be available both on the Manidown side of the Roman Road and on the Winklebury side of the Roman Road. So any suggestion that Manidown should be wrapped up in gilt paper and protected from the contamination from Winklebury is absolutely ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. There is a need for interaction across. Instead of saying to the people in Winklebury, go up and around and come down, by the way, which is absolutely nightmarish if you're going to school. And there will be schools on the Manidown side of the Roman Road, and there will be different schools on the Winklebury side of Roman Road, and people will have to cross that road repeatedly. So, but apart from that, I've got nothing to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keating. Councillor Raffel.
Well, can I thank you for your comments on Manydown? I don't think I need to add or comment upon them. I think they speak for themselves. Can I just deal with the, your comments on Downgrange? I don't think I need to add anything to them. I think they speak for themselves. On your comments on Manydown, when a new community is being created, it has to find its own identity. And it's not going to be Winklebury gone west. It's going to be a new community. And a new community has to, of course, have links to its neighbouring communities, obviously. And it's all about striking the right balance between the two. There is a danger that if many connections are made between Winklebury and whatever's going to happen to the west, it would be seen as West Winklebury. And that would therefore mean its identity was defined by Winklebury. And there is also the effect that that would have upon the residents of Winklebury, who may not want to be connected to the new urban development or rural urban development, whatever development it's going to be called, the new development. So it's about a balance. And I suspect through the master planning process that balance will be struck in due course. So whilst I've understood your comments, I don't think I can do much more about it at this stage.
Did you have a supplementary question, Councillor Keating?
Yes. If you look at the map of Basingstoke as it currently is, each new community, Hatwarren, Beggarwood, Hopley, each time they've been renewed or developed, they've got an identity, and they didn't need to worry about the neighbouring area being a different name. The reality is, what you're seeking to suggest is that Manydown might be subsumed into Winklebury. You know and I know that will never be the case. Is it not true to say that Manydown will always have a better name than Winklebury, because Manydown will be built in a different way and it'll be a better quality development. So it'll retain its identity in its own right. What I'm seeking to suggest to you is do not isolate it from Winklebury to the detriment of the people in Winklebury and the people who need to cross the boundaries.
Can I respond to that? One of the things that I've suggested is which I wrote into the policy over the weekend, was the inclusion. Will you listen? It was the inclusion of cycle paths and footpaths connecting, in particular, to the country park for the benefit of the residents of Winklebury. Well, you may say big deal. But I think the residents of Winklebury might think it's a bonus, and it wasn't in the policy, so it's a good thing.
You're isolating Manydown from Winklebury, and that is to the detriment of Winklebury, and it is absolutely ludicrous.
Thank you, Councillor Keating. But actually, thank you. I think the points that Councillor Raffel raised early on, the modifications he proposes to make to to that particular policy, go a very long way to actually answering the very point that you're making. So it may be a matter of degree, but there are other considerations as well, like traffic, etc., which have to be borne in mind. We will wait to see what the final outcome of the wording is.
He's just in his own behind closed doors on a Sunday in his house. How will we want to influence such policy?
Councillor Keating, the policy was sent out to all councillors with an opportunity for everybody to comment on it, not just this evening. The same thing will happen again with the opportunity for everybody to comment on it on Friday. And I was going to add that I have been on record since God knows when, but something like 2008, that Pack Lane should be protected, Downgrange should be protected. I have no intention of changing my mind on that fact. Well, there are some things that the chaps can't do. Right, we'll move on then to Councillor Durrant from Bramley Parish Council.
Right, thank you.
Good evening. Can you just hang on a second while I try and make this damn machine work in some way that I can keep a rough check on the time? Oh, she's going to come and show me how to do it now. But I think I just pressed the wrong button because I have to reach so far. Oh. Well, how do I reset it? Yeah.
And then
Repeat.
stop, and then repeat.
I'm ignoring it anyway. Right, please begin.
Right, thank you for giving us a chance to speak. As you know, Bramley Parish Council has made consistent and repeated representations to the Cabinet and the P&I with one main thrust, which is that the parish has grown over 400% since 1984, and the proposed 3 sites within the Bramley Parish now of over 1,000 dwellings would be 61% increase on the current level of 1,650 homes, which is a phenomenal increase in that period. Two of those, Razors Farm and Cufford Farm in the south of the parish, essentially moved Basingstoke north into our parish, reducing the rural atmosphere and a green barrier, if you like. The 200 homes on an NDP allocation on SS5 are adjacent to the settlement boundary, and that policy seems to preclude that 200 being contributed to by infilling. Therefore, it remains that we would have to look at one or both of 2 Category 1 sites we have in Bramley, both of which are north of the village and are the last 2 remaining green views for what is a rural community that is desperately trying to hang on to being a rural community. We are concerned about the NDP allocation on top of Razors Farm and Cufford Farm. And of course, as we've said consistently, we are asking for respite for this 15-year period, given the levels of housing we've had placed upon us over the last, since 1984. I don't intend to repeat all the statistics and all the things. You've all had those in writing and our representation. So that's all I'm going to say. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bell is also due to speak. Is it going to be on a similar issue or on a... Perhaps we could have you then, and then Councillor Phil, you'd like to respond to the 2 together would make more sense, I think. That's okay. You might as well, if you like, yeah, because then if there is a supplementary you want to raise, you can do it between you.
Thank you, Chair. As a parish councillor and chair of the neighbourhood planning, I'm going to actually present it in that part. You've probably heard some of it before, but excuse that if that's the case. As actually said by Councillor Duran, Bramley Parish Council has throughout asked for, with good reason, that Bramley be given respite from development, recognising the adverse impacts on the local infrastructure, social, structural and services of the recent significant developments in both absolute numbers and relative terms to other areas within the borough that Bramley has absorbed over recent years. Bramley has initiated the neighbourhood planning, has government funding and been granted support from planning aid to get the plan in place with a date of October-November 2014 for the referendum. It's not a small task putting the ideas of the community into the plan that determines the future of Bramley, as you have found in deciding the future of the borough over the next 10 to 15 years. But it will happen, and it is giving the community the opportunity to have their say, backed by the government, backed by Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council and Bramley Parish Council. Recent surveys indicate concerns over the lack of improvement in the infrastructure, transport, recreational facilities, shops, schooling, etc., besides the strain on services such as sewage and water that Bramley suffers. The parish boundary encompassing the area to the south is accepted by Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council as the neighbourhood plan area, and it is therefore of great concern to the steering group as to the number of houses that it should consider, because it encompasses Razors Farm, Cufford Farm, and according to the PI paper presented, approximately 200 houses within the village environs to be sited by neighbourhood planning. The neighbourhood plan has to state what the vision for Bramley is in the future. This is yet to be written, but it has to state that Bramley is a happy, pleasant place to live, providing all the facilities that make Bramley a place where people want to live. Any number of houses being allocated to the parish the size of Bramley with poor infrastructure that has to be improved out of all proportions is outrageous when we as parishioners can see other more suitable sites that can be developed from scratch but are not being developed to their full potential. Such a development would relieve Bramley Parish and other similar sized parishes of accommodating more unsustainable housing. Besides the vision for Bramley, the model policy of Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council within the paper states that it will secure development and improve the economic, social and environmental conditions. This is not what this plan is going to do to Bramley. If Bramley is going to be allocated houses, and if in passing this paper you ignore all the points made with a reference to increasing housing in Bramley and similar sized parishes which do not have the infrastructure to support such increases at this time, we trust that this council will support and honour its commitment to neighbourhood planning and that planning applications by developers within the window of opportunity to the local plan being accepted and outside of the policies that are being laid down with the plan will be rejected. If not, the community are not being given the opportunity to decide the future of our village, Bramley, and this council is not honouring its commitment to neighbourhood planning.
Thank you. Councillor Raffaele.
Can I thank both of you for what you've said? As I said to you before, this is not an easy decision. You know that I've heard what you've said. Your councillors have made representations to me directly and obviously publicly as well. The difficulty we have is we are where we are now. Had you not had the previous development in Bramley, there perhaps would be an unarguable case for the 200. But because you've had the previous development, you feel you haven't seen justice done. And the consideration we have to weigh up is that we are told that there are currently 72 households in housing need in Bramley, and we have to consider the need of the parish throughout the lifetime of the plan. That's where we approach this from. I have to take account of, I'll discuss with Cabinet in a moment, but I have to take account of the fact that this has been through the Planning Infrastructure Committee, and I've listened to what they have said, and they haven't recommended taking out your site. And even if Cabinet took the view now that it should happen, then we would have to find 200 somewhere else in the borough where there's pain elsewhere, and that's the way it is, I'm afraid. But I can just finally say thank you for coming here today.
Do you have any other questions? You have questions, I'm afraid.
The concern I have, or we have, is that Bramley Parish has a need for 72 people to be housed. 72 people is not 72 dwellings. Therefore, at 40%, that is not 200 homes, potentially. And also, the Razors Farm and Cufford Farm, if developed, and we see a very strong, almost already made decision to develop those sites, at 40% affordable social accommodation, that would more than cover the need in the parish without the 200 homes adjacent to the settlement boundary. Thank you.
All I can say is the paper I've got here says 72 households, but I'm not going to argue with you. Whatever the figure is, I understand the point you make. It's more on top of a lot, and I understand the difficulties. I don't suppose that the strategic gap is helping deal with that problem, but I hope you feel in some way it gives some element of protection. And we've listened to your representatives in trying to bring that about, because of course it didn't exist as a policy before the last 12 months.
I haven't obviously discussed this with the parish council, so I'm not necessarily representing the majority view, but I would say a strategic gap is good. I think our issue lies with the fact that Basingstoke is moving north into the parish, and these 200 homes will mean we're moving north into the Duke of Wellington's estate, or that area that separates us from Reading, if you like. So whilst we welcome any barrier, green barrier there, that you know, we still have these concerns, but we do appreciate it.
Thank you, gentlemen. Right, I think before we throw this open for comments from other members, Councillor Raffel, do you wish to briefly summarise where we are?
I think, as I was making clear just then, I'm not going to recommend to Cabinet a change in the sites. I'm staying in line with what Planning Infrastructure decided, and that's my recommendation to you, with the amendments that I've discussed tonight to the policies.
Okay, members, comments, please. Anybody? No? Oh, back. Councillor Golding, then.
Very, very reluctantly, Leader, I'm going to vote against at this stage. I want publicly to commend the portfolio holder for the changes he's brought forward, and I support all of them. I think, in my view, we're getting close to having a local plan that is likely to be found sound at the examination in public, but I do not believe we're there yet. Some of the changes do not go quite far enough. I also want to make it absolutely clear that I accept the evidence that 3,080 is the appropriate number of dwellings to be built on Manydown up to 2029, and I want to see good quality development started as soon as possible. But I'm not yet persuaded that we have the new settlement policy boundary in the right place. There seems to be still quite some confusion over the numbers, differences between what was in the site assessment, what was in the Tibbles report, numbers that officers were giving to me in an email on Friday. Yes. There may be answers, but they don't seem to have emerged yet. And without those answers, I fear that, as with the local plan review, what is being proposed will not be found to be sound at the examination in public. In particular, I do not think it is the role of the planning authority to give flexibility to landowners to decide where houses should go. It is our role as the planning authority to make those decisions, and we need to get the settlement policy boundary in the right place where we want the houses to be built between now and 2029. I also remain concerned about the inclusion of the golf course. As has already been alluded, Dunmer Parish Council, various residents, myself have been at more than one meeting and explained why that it does not seem to fit the tests in the NPPF. We are not persuaded that it is the most appropriate strategy. I don't think the issue has been particularly discussed at P&I. Certainly I don't think there is any definitive statement as to why it is considered to be appropriate. This may need to be resolved at the examination in public, but it would be better if we could sort it out by discussion and agreement before then. As I say, there may be answers, but again, I haven't seen them. So, as I say, with great reluctance, I shall vote against at this stage, but I shall be continuing to follow the debate, and if answers come on some of these points, I will be open to supporting at a later stage. Thank you.
Councillors now.
Thank you, Leader. First, let me apologise for not being at P&I earlier on when the Manydown policy was discussed. As some councillors will know, my father died earlier in the week, which meant I'm afraid I prioritised my family and his funeral over the P&I meeting. But I think that's been alluded to a couple of times that wasn't spoken, and I think it's appropriate that I put that on record. I then want to compliment Councillor Raffel for the sheer amount of work he's done on this. But I also think that it's not just Councillor Raffel on this. He's very much the last person in the tag team who's trying to take it over the finishing line. And it's also appropriate at this time that we pay regard to Councillor Golding and Councillor Sherlock for also putting a huge amount of effort into this plan as well. I have to say, I share an awful lot of Councillor Golding's comments. I will very reluctantly be supporting the plan at this stage, but I do think there are major areas around the SPB and the allocations that do need to be sorted out as we progress through. I know the portfolio holder and yourself, Leader, will continue to get confirmation around these, and I would hope that progressively we can move forward to get that. I don't think we're in a final position on this, and indeed if this was the final position I may have to relook, but I am hopeful that we can get some confirmation of this going forward. On the wider one, first of all, talking at a wider stage around our new renewable energy policy. I am glad this administration is continuing what I call our practical and sensible approach to environmental issues. We are trying to encourage renewable energies, but encourage them in a way that is not intrusive into our beautiful countryside and not intrusive for our residents. So I think Councillor Raffel has come with a policy which balances both sides of the argument, and I compliment him for that. Going local as I am, of course, a ward member for Winkelbury, I just really wanted to focus on some key points around there. I'm very pleased as we've taken forward our plans for Winkelbury, we're really paying attention to the impact this development will have on local communities. One of the greatest concerns of the residents of Winkelbury, and indeed Buckskin, which now includes Worting and the areas around that site, has been the issue of 3,000 cars, or cars from 3,000 houses plus, coming through quiet residential streets in order to exit onto the ring road at Hinesmill. I think the way forward we have done, I think, is the right way forward. I'm convinced that we need some little minimal access onto the Roman road, if not just for emergency vehicles, but that has to be minimised. I think a better wording might be restrict vehicle access to a minimal level to and from new development. I think this will promote a coherent community, two coherent communities. It will provide the access to the schools and to local facilities, but we should remember they are two different communities and will be. It is important to note the transport assessment and the work done on that majors on keeping the ring roads, the B3400 and the A339 flowing, and in that transport assessment it has a restriction of access for the residents of Winkelbury getting out on either side. Obviously, we are now taking measures to minimise that restriction and make sure that those areas are not overflowed. I'm also very pleased that we have put in there the policy that we need to respect the landscape of Manydown as viewed from the existing developments around it. Winkelbury and Buckskin are distinctive areas, and it's important that we respond to them. As Councillor Raffel says, it's not going to be Winkelbury gone west. I'd like to end, Leader, in complimenting Councillor Raffel again and yourself for pushing this one through. I think we are almost there. We do need to do more work, especially around the SPB boundaries around Manydown, because I do not wish to mitigate control of our planning to developers, whether it be in other wards because we don't have a local plan, or in some wards because we have too loose a local plan. I think that's something that should unite all councillors from all areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to comment at this stage? Okay, so I will just sum up if I may. I think when you have a document of some 300 and something pages, it's inevitable that you're going to find things in it that you agree with, and some things that you may be less happy with. At the end of the day, it's about finding a balance of, are there, on the whole, things which are correctly written or at least going in the right direction. This is a continuing process. It's work in progress. This is to get us to the stage when council can agree on a plan that will go out for consultation. With going out for consultation, there clearly the opportunity for people to comment and to feed back those comments, so that further amendments will undoubtedly take place before this finishes up in council in December for final approval. I hope that everybody will take the opportunity to put forward those comments. Nevertheless, I think that on balance, this is a very workable plan, and I take on board the areas where there is still further clarification to be got on some quite key issues, some of which cannot be got until we move through, for instance, the master planning of Manydown, which will be evolving over the next couple of months. And that will, I think, clarify some some areas of concern quite significantly at that stage. Whether or not we will all agree then on whether or not this is the right way to go is a different issue, but at least we will get clarification during that period of time. But we do have to move forward with this. We cannot go on not having a local plan in place as a borough. That would be a disaster for all of our residents, wherever they were, if planning was just left to a free-for-all and became planning by appeal. I would echo all the comments thanking Councillor O'Fell for the tremendous efforts he's put in, and also the style in which he's done it, in a very much more collegiate style than is sometimes the case. And also to thank those councillors from all parties who've responded very positively to those efforts to get on board a wide range of ideas and try to come up with something around which we can all coalesce in support. So, are we happy to recommend the plan as it stands, with the amendments as put forward by Councillor O'Fell this evening, with some wording still to be refined during the course of the next day or so before it actually gets to Council on Thursday? And the delegation, sorry, I forgot that point, as on the list of things. Agreed? Well, we don't normally vote, we just agreed. He's going to vote against. The rest of us are happy. So that's carried. Good. Then that is done. I'm trying to think if there's any more on the agenda. Yes, there are some matters dealt with by portfolio holders under delegated powers. That's just for noting. Noted. Then I shall adjourn the meeting at 7:22.